That morning was gray, the kind of sky that makes even a city like Manhattan hesitate. At the top floor of a sleek glass building in an apartment where everything was calibrated to perfection, lights, temperature, the rhythm of coffee, and silence, Ethan Walker began his day like any other. He sat at his desk, espresso in hand, eyes scanning a report from a Swiss AI startup he was negotiating to acquire. There was no sound, no surprises. At 35, Ethan was a venture capital CEO who lived in a world where emotions were liabilities and unpredictability was the enemy. Until the doorbell rang, he looked up, frowning. No one got to this floor without clearance. No deliveries, no guests, no schedule showing any interruption. He stood, crossed the cold marble floors slowly, and opened the door with the guarded instinct of a man who controlled every variable. And then, everything inside him halted. She was there. Grace Harper. Her once long hair was now short, her face thinner, her posture stronger. But the calm in her eyes was still there, the same calm that once pulled him in like gravity. But it wasn't her that froze him. It was the child in her arms. A little boy, maybe 4 years old. Brown hair, fair skin, intense focused stare, and those eyes, steel gray, unmistakable. He saw himself. Grace didn't look away. No tears, no drama, just the quiet composure of someone who had learned to survive alone for far too long. "Hi, Ethan," she said first. "This is Leo. He's your son." The apartment lights were still glowing on schedule, the coffee still warm, the files still open on the screen. But inside Ethan, every line of logic he lived by came undone. He couldn't move. He just stared at the boy, who stared back with curiosity, trying to figure out who this stranger was. "My son?" he stammered. Grace nodded. No unnecessary explanation, no begging, no demands. "I didn't come here for anything," she said softly. "I just think he deserves to know where he came from." Ethan looked again at Leo, who stood quietly, gripping a tiny plastic dinosaur. His gaze was unfamiliar, but not fearful, as if the boy already understood what it meant to grow up without a father. And in that moment, for the first time in years, Ethan had no idea what to say. He averted his eyes from Grace, and in a voice lower than usual, he asked, "Would you like to come in?" And just like that, the silence that had ruled his life for years was broken, not by sound, but by the presence of two people he once left behind, the woman he tried to forget, and the child he never knew he had. 4 years ago, Ethan Walker stood under the crystal chandeliers of one of New York's most exclusive charity galas. Marble columns, champagne flutes, conversations wrapped in numbers, valuations, and acquisition strategy. He was the center of it all, the man everyone wanted to meet, investors, journalists, and women whose eyes always saw power before humanity. But Grace Harper wasn't a guest that night. She wore a black server's uniform, her hair pulled into a rushed bun. She floated between tables with trays of canapes and wine, working back-to-back shifts to pay rent and help her ailing grandmother. Grace hated places like this, glittering on the outside, hollow at the core. But money was money. And from her perspective, men like Ethan weren't people. They were glass walls in a museum, untouchable, distant, irrelevant. Until it happened. A drunken guest grabbed her wrist, whispered disgusting things in her ear. She tried to pull away. He wouldn't let go. Then a low voice cut through the noise. "Let her go. Now." Ethan, he didn't need to raise his voice. He just stood there, tall, calm, commanding. The man backed off immediately. Grace froze. She hadn't expected him, the host of the event, to be the one to step in. She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Thank you." "What's your name?" he asked. "Grace," she replied, still stunned. He said nothing more, just looked at her, Not like a server, like someone he couldn't quite explain, firm, poised, quiet even in distress. And maybe it was that quiet fire in her eyes that cracked something in him, something buried, forgotten. When the gala ended, the marble hall was nearly empty. Grace was quietly clearing wine glasses when Ethan appeared again. No longer surrounded by admirers, stripped of his spotlight, he stood alone, silent, weary, and with something strangely lost in his eyes. "Let me take you home," he offered, his voice low and husky. Grace hesitated. She should have said no, like she always did. But something in his eyes stopped her. They didn't look at her like the others did. They didn't see a uniform or a body. They saw something raw, familiar. And for a moment, just one tired, vulnerable moment, she let her guard down. The hotel room was warm with golden light. There was no rush, no slick charm or cheap promises. Ethan didn't try to impress her. He poured her a glass of water. He listened as she spoke about her sick grandmother, about working double shifts to survive. He didn't offer pity, just quiet presence. Something broke open inside Grace that night, not because she needed him, but because she was tired. Tired of carrying everything alone. And Ethan, a stranger, yes, somehow made her feel safe enough to stop pretending she was fine. What happened between them wasn't just desire. It was two people, bruised in different ways, seeing each other clearly through all the noise. But the next morning, Grace woke up alone. The bed was cold. The room was still. No note, no trace of him, only an envelope on the nightstand. Inside, cash, more than she made in a month. She froze, fingers trembling around the crisp edge of the envelope. Her heart pounded in her chest, heavy and slow. She wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding, that he'd just stepped out, that he'd come back. But deep down, she already knew. She called the front desk. Ethan had checked out at sunrise. No message. And in that cold, impersonal hallway, where she stood waiting with that crumpled envelope still in her hand, Grace finally understood. To Ethan, she wasn't a beginning. She was just a night. And by morning, she'd been erased like she never existed. Maybe to him it was a fleeting act of kindness. But to her, it had been the first night in years she didn't feel alone. And that, the cruel hope, was what hurt the most. Grace didn't remember exactly how she left the hotel that morning. She only remembered the blinding sunlight, her trembling legs, and how the envelope in her hand suddenly felt as heavy as her shame, and her extinguished hope. She walked for hours, wandering aimlessly through New York streets that no longer sparkled like they had the night before. In her mind was a loop of unanswered questions. Why did he disappear? What was I thinking? How could I ever believe? But what hurt more than being abandoned was the feeling that for just a few fleeting hours, she had truly been seen. That someone had looked at her not for her looks, not for her status, but for who she really was. She had let trust light up a dark corner of her soul. And then, that light vanished. A week later, Grace's body began to change. She felt nauseous every morning, repulsed by the smell of coffee and soap. When her period was late, she knew something was happening. On a rainy afternoon, she stepped into a pharmacy and bought a pregnancy test. She didn't wait to get home. In a tiny restroom under the cold glare of a fluorescent light, 2 red lines appeared, bold, undeniable. She took another test, then another, all the same. Grace sank to the tiled floor, her back against the door, her hands gripping the test stick. No tears, no screams, just silence, deep and heavy, like a destiny the universe had quietly written. She was only 22, still in college, no parents, only a frail grandmother she lived with. A woman who, upon hearing the news, didn't scream because of the child, but because, "You've destroyed your future, Grace. a waitress pregnant by a man whose real name you don't even know. 2 weeks later, her grandmother kicked her out. Her belongings were packed into a cardboard box and left on the doorstep, like something discarded. She didn't cry. There were no tears left. From the moment she knew a tiny life was growing inside her, Grace had changed. She found a basement room to rent, damp with moldy walls and a creaky ceiling. The landlady was a widowed old woman who let Grace stay in exchange for cleaning, cooking, and walking her grandson to school each morning. By day, she sold handmade soaps on the sidewalk. In the afternoon, she babysat. At night, she took college classes online using free Wi-Fi from a bakery down the street. She did her homework beside piles of laundry, took notes while drying cloth diapers. And every night, she placed a hand on her belly and whispered, "As long as you're here, I won't fall." Her belly grew, and so did the stares from strangers. Some looked with pity, some with judgment. But she didn't care. She didn't need anyone to believe in her. She only needed the child inside her to know Mama never gave up. In the 6th month, one night while folding laundry, she felt the first kick, gentle but unmistakable. Grace laughed, her first real laugh in months. "Your name will be Leo," she whispered. "My little lion. I may be scared, but you be brave for me, okay?" When the day of birth came, she walked into the hospital alone. No one by her side, no one waiting in the hallway, just screams, footsteps, pain that tore through her body. And then Leo's cry filled the room. The nurse placed him on her chest. When his tiny gray eyes opened, Grace felt her heart stop, not from pain, but from peace. She didn't need anyone to pick her up. No flowers, no cake, no Ethan, just her child. She wrapped Leo in her old coat and took a cab back to the basement. With no crib, she lined a laundry basket with towels for his bed. Days passed, then weeks, then months. She made toys from plastic bottles, cooked porridge with donated vegetables, sewed diapers from old cloth, memorized every fever, every drop of medicine, every distinct cry. And then one day, Leo said, "Mama." She held him close, feeling her heart, after all the years of layered wounds, begin to heal. Grace never once spoke Ethan's name, never sent another letter, because she thought, if he wanted to find me, he would have. But there was one thing she hadn't expected. One day, Leo, his voice soft and eyes full of curiosity, looked up and asked, "Mama, do I have a daddy?" And in that very moment, Grace understood. Silence was no longer an option. And now, 4 years after that lonely hospital birth, Grace sat in the luxurious apartment of the man who once disappeared from her life, her hand resting gently on her son's back as she prepared to open a truth she once vowed to carry alone. The apartment was still and silent, but something inside it had shifted. Ethan sat on the leather sofa while Grace gently helped Leo settle onto the soft rug near the fireplace. The apartment was as quiet as ever, but the air had changed. Ethan sat on the leather sofa while Grace gently helped Leo settle onto the soft rug near the fireplace. The boy immediately pulled out a box of crayons and began drawing on the back of a grocery receipt. That innocence made something twist inside Ethan. Grace placed a navy blue folder on the glass coffee table between them. The edges were worn, one corner slightly bent. It looked like something opened and folded 100 times. Too personal, too fragile. Inside, you'll find the birth certificate, medical records, some of his drawings, and other things, Grace said, her eyes on her son. "You don't have to look right away, but I think you should know." Ethan straightened, his eyes locked onto the folder. His fingers trembled slightly as he opened it. The first page slid out. Birth certificate. Mother, Grace Harper. Father, Ethan Walker. He swallowed hard, not out of shock, but out of the slow, painful realization of everything he had missed. Next came medical notes, fever records, immunizations, a small scribbled doctor's line. Bronchiolitis, 10 months. He hadn't known, hadn't been there. Then came the drawings, messy crayon lines, wild colors. One had 3 stick figures, a mother, a boy, and a tall man beside them. Above it, scrawled in crooked letters, "Looking for Dad." Ethan looked away, his throat locked up. "I didn't know," he whispered, almost in shame. "I tried," Grace answered, neither cold nor kind. "I called, I wrote, I left messages, but eventually I had to choose being a mother over begging for presents." Silence stretched between them like a web. Ethan glanced at Leo, now lying on his stomach, coloring a purple 3-legged dinosaur with an oversized smile. He spoke again, eyes still on the boy. "You raised him alone?" Grace nodded softly. "Not because I wanted to, because no one stayed." Ethan exhaled, a slow crack forming in his chest. He wasn't the man who negotiated billion-dollar deals anymore. He was just a father, late to his own story. "I want to know him," he said, voice lower, truer. "I don't know how, but I want to learn, slowly, if you'll let me." Grace didn't answer immediately. She studied him, not to judge, but to search for something real. "I'm not here to test you," she said quietly, "but I won't let my son dream about someone who might disappear." Ethan nodded, stripped of defense this time. "Good," Grace said, then turned to the rug and called gently, "Leo, sweetie, come here a sec." The boy trotted over, holding his unfinished drawing. "Remember Mr. Ethan? He came today because he wants to know more about you." Leo looked up at Ethan like he was analyzing a brand new cartoon character. Then, with a grin, he held out the picture. "I drew a dinosaur. Do you like dinosaurs?" Ethan laughed. "I do, very much." "Then you're a good guy," Leo declared firmly. Grace dipped her head, hiding a smile. And in that moment, no one said anything else, but all 3 of them could feel something. Just beginning. The cafe sat quietly on a Brooklyn corner, its faded green awning flapping in the breeze. The smell of warm cinnamon waffles drifted onto the sidewalk. Grace had chosen a table outside, close enough to see the park across the street. Leo sat in a high chair, legs swinging, sipping purple grape juice from a dinosaur-shaped straw cup. Ethan arrived right on time. No suit, no expensive watch, just a rolled-up shirt and an awkward smile. "Hi, you two," he greeted, holding a coffee from inside. Grace nodded. Her gaze wasn't cold anymore, but still careful. She didn't smile. But she didn't shut him out, either. Leo held up a colorful dinosaur book. "Mr. Ethan, this is a Stegosaurus. He's strong, but he's not mean." Ethan sat across from the boy, leaning forward. "Oh yeah, he's got spikes on his back, but just for defense, right?" "Right. You know a lot." Grace watched them quietly. Ethan didn't pull out his phone, didn't check his watch. He listened, truly listened. And there was something startlingly sincere in that, something that made her feel unexpectedly at ease. After the snack, they crossed the street to the park. Leo bolted to the slide, then the seesaw, then called out from the swing set. "Push me, Daddy." Ethan walked over, hesitant. He was used to controlling boardrooms, not playgrounds. He glanced at Grace. "How do I do this right?" She gave him a soft smile. "Just do it. He'll teach you the right way." And he did. Minutes later, Leo's laughter echoed through the park. "Higher, Daddy? Higher!" Ethan laughed too. He pushed a little harder, then looked up at the wide, sunlit sky, where his son's voice rang like forgiveness. From the nearby bench, Grace sat still, no longer guarding herself. She kept her eyes on the 2 people who mattered most. A little boy who loved without question, and a man learning how to love from scratch. On the ride home, Leo fell asleep in the back seat, curled around his green plush dinosaur. Ethan drove in silence, then finally spoke. "Thank you for letting me have this. I don't deserve it, but you let me anyway." Grace looked out the window. Her fingers tightened slightly around the hem of her coat. "You still don't have all the answers," she said, "but for once you're asking the right questions." Ethan nodded. When they reached the modest apartment building, he stopped the car, got out, and gently lifted Leo from the seat. The boy breathed softly, head resting on his shoulder like he'd done it forever. Ethan handed him to Grace, but before she walked inside, he asked quietly, "Can I keep trying?" She paused, looked at him for a long moment, not with anger, but with the eyes of someone who'd been hurt enough to recognize truth when she saw it. "For him, yes," she replied, "but I'll be watching." And she walked inside, not just through the door, but into something new. Ethan stood there for a while, watching the door close. Not like an ending, but like the beginning of something real. The news broke on an ordinary Monday morning. Grace was getting Leo ready for school when her phone began buzzing nonstop. Texts, emails, even a call from an old friend she hadn't heard from in years. She didn't need to open her laptop. One photo told the whole story. Leo on the swing, laughing with his whole face. Ethan standing behind, pushing gently, eyes softened in a way the world had never seen from him. Beneath the image, the headline on a celebrity gossip site screamed, "Billionaire Ethan Walker and a secret child. Mystery woman spotted in Brooklyn Park." Grace froze. Her heart slowed, beat by heavy beat. At first, she brushed it off. The internet could spin hurricanes out of whispers. But the real storm arrived the next morning. The homepage of a major news outlet. Walker scandal. Unnamed woman claims child with CEO. Questions of heir rights emerge. They said claims. They called her unnamed. And they didn't speak of Leo as a boy, but as a legal complication. Ethan called before she even finished reading the article. "Did you see it?" His voice was colder than it had been in days. Grace gripped the phone. "I did." "Did you talk to anyone? A reporter? Someone at the cafe?" "You think I sold out our son?" she snapped. "Grace, please understand. My company is under fire. The board is panicking. My lawyers are working overtime to manage the fallout." "Ah, your lawyers." Her voice turned bitter. "Not our problem, not our child. Just you, doing damage control like last time when you disappeared without a word." Ethan fell silent. No defense. No denial. "I thought you'd changed," she said softly, "but all it took was one headline, and you're gone again, just like before." "Grace, I didn't mean—" "No need," she cut him off. "I get it now." And for the first time in years, she was the one to hang up first. That night, Grace held Leo close when he asked, "Mom, is Daddy going away again?" She didn't answer, just hugged him tighter. Leo's eyes closed as sleep took him, but the questions stayed behind. Silent, stubborn, and familiar. Once again, she found herself facing the very thing that had once broken her heart. Silence. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The apartment felt colder than ever. He opened his laptop, logged into the legal team's archive. The photographer's name appeared. A few clicks later, the client name flashed back. Catherine Walker, image advisor, stepmother. He couldn't breathe. The next morning, he stormed into the family estate. Catherine was by the pool, reading calmly. "It was you," he said through clenched teeth. She looked up, unfazed. "I don't know what you mean." "You hired the photographer. You leaked those pictures." She sighed, closed her book. "I did what needed to be done. That woman is a threat to the Walker name? You really thought I'd stay silent? That woman is the mother of my child. She's a mistake, Ethan, and mistakes must be cleaned up. Ethan drove home like lightning. He found the box Grace had once left behind. At the bottom was a photo, Grace with messy hair, standing on a street corner, holding a cardboard sign. Handmade soap for babies' diapers. On the back, written in faded ink, "You were already a father, even if you didn't know it. I never hated you. I just waited for you to see us. With your heart." And for the first time in years, Ethan collapsed over his desk and cried. That morning, the elementary school where Leo studied buzzed with unusual excitement. The hallways were decorated with paper flags, colorful hearts, and cardboard ties hand-drawn by the children. On a small stage draped in pale blue fabric, dozens of students prepared for the Father's Day celebration. In the last row, Grace sat quietly, as always. She wore a simple dress, her hair neatly tied back, her face trying to stay calm, but her hands were tightly clenched. On stage, Leo stood in the second row, clutching the sign he had worked on all week. It was a messy drawing of a father and son holding hands, with a blue marker message above. "Dad, I love you to the sky." The boy lifted his head and scanned the crowd, eyes searching. At first he smiled, but when he didn't find the face he was hoping for, that smile quickly faded. The sign drooped in his hands, as if his hope had crumbled just a little more. Leo lowered his head. A teacher bent down and whispered something in his ear, but he only shook his head slightly. That little boy had already prepared himself to be disappointed again. And then, the doors at the back of the auditorium swung open. Ethan appeared, breathless, shirt wrinkled, no tie, hair tousled by the wind. He rushed forward under the stunned gaze of the audience. In his hand was a small box. On his face was a kind of determination Grace had never seen before. Leo spotted him. His eyes lit up. He shouted, "Mom! Dad's here!" No one had time to react. The boy bolted from his row, ran down the aisle, and launched himself into Ethan's arms, already kneeling and waiting. Ethan hugged his son tightly, as if every missed moment could only be redeemed by pouring all the love he had left into this one. "I'm sorry I'm late," he whispered, voice trembling. "Give me a chance to really be your dad." Leo wrapped his arms around Ethan's neck and murmured, "I just needed you to come." A teacher handed Ethan a microphone. He opened the small box and pulled out a paper tie decorated with a dinosaur and scribbled words. "World's best dad." He put it around his neck, stood up, gently squeezed Leo's hand, and said, "Now I'm ready." Leo held his father's hand and led him back to the stage. The music started. They sang, off-key, out of sync, but full of warmth. In the last row, Grace wiped away her tears. For the first time in years, they didn't come from pain, but from a hope restored. Ethan had shown up, and this time he had chosen to stay. In the days following the school assembly, Ethan didn't disappear. He didn't make promises, didn't send vague texts about needing to talk. Instead, he showed up. In the morning, videos of how to draw dinosaurs. In the afternoon, a message asking if he could take Leo to the park. On weekends, they watched cartoons, shared popcorn, and laughed like the cracks of the past had never existed. Leo adjusted faster than Grace ever imagined. He began calling Ethan Dad naturally, without coaching, without hesitation. Sometimes in his sleep, he whispered the word, like calling to something that had always been there, even if it hadn't. Grace was different. She wasn't cold anymore, but she wasn't wide open either. She watched, not with suspicion, but with the quiet patience of someone relearning trust. And what surprised her most was that Ethan was learning to trust himself too. He no longer checked his phone during every conversation. No more glancing at his inbox every 5 minutes. Instead, he sat on the floor-building towers with Leo, learned how to make pancakes from Grace's recipe, and laughed when the eggs burned. One evening, after Leo had fallen asleep, Ethan stayed behind in the little kitchen. He didn't ask about the future. He simply poured Grace a glass of water, as if that simple act meant everything. Grace looked at him, not with the eyes of someone who'd been hurt, but as someone who was slowly starting to believe that maybe this time was different. And when Leo woke up crying in the middle of the night, calling out Daddy instead of Mom, they looked at each other. No words, just a smile, no labels, no guarantees, just something quietly being built day by day from the smallest things. That afternoon, the three of them walked along the beach. The sun dipped low, casting golden-orange light across the sand and the slow-moving waves. Leo ran ahead, carrying a red bucket and a blue shovel. He shouted into the ocean breeze like he was talking to the whole world. Grace walked barefoot, her dress skimming the warm sand. Beside her, Ethan strolled slowly, hands in pockets, his white shirt fluttering in the wind. They said nothing, but the silence wasn't distance anymore. It was peace. Leo started digging a hole, announcing he was building a castle. Ethan knelt beside him, helping shape the first uneven walls. Each handful of sand crumbled, tilted, fell, and was rebuilt again. Grace watched. She knew the tide would come, the castle would vanish, but what they were building that day wasn't in the sand. Ethan stood, brushed his hands off, and turned to her. "I want to ask you something." She looked at him. No surprise, no walls. "I've missed too much," he said. "But ever since I found you and Leo again, I don't want to live without you anymore. Not out of guilt, but because, for the first time, I want to choose this." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple silver ring set with a small blue stone. Nothing flashy, but solid. "Give me the chance, not just to be a father, but to be the man who stays, not perfect, but present." Grace didn't speak. She looked at the ring, then at him, and finally at Leo, who was waving from afar. "Mom, Dad finished the wall. Come see?" She smiled. No fear, no hesitation. She stepped forward and took Ethan's hand. "We've already started," she said softly. "Just keep building it with me." He slipped the ring onto her finger. No ceremony, no crowd. Just wind, sand, and belief. For the first time, the three of them sat down together, side by side, and finished the castle. They knew the tide would come, the wind would return, but they also knew real love isn't built in the sand. It lives in the hands that rebuild, again and again.